Good evening, everyone. Hi, Chanel, Marshall, and
Hi.
hi, and Anastasia. How are you? Hey, Marielle.
Hello. Just give me a moment to get sorted. We're still waiting to meet quorum. My daughter's in the background. You can probably hear baby toys, so bear with me.
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's almost Friday, right?
Exactly. That's why I'm awesome.
Exactly. I like the attitude.
Yes.
And I see that Anastasia's here. I think.
Curtis C. Young is here. Hello.
Okay. Let me see. Hi, Curtis. Okay. Looks like we still have to wait a few minutes in order to reach quorum before we can kick off the meeting. So please sit tight. Thank you for your patience, and hopefully we'll be able to start soon. Curtis, I noticed that your hand is up. Can I acknowledge you once we officially start the meeting? If that's okay, so that way it's on the record officially. Unless it's something else. I'm not sure what it is. Go ahead and put in. Okay, sure thing. Great. Thank you.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, Bruce. I can't see anyone's face, but I recognize your voice. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Bruce. Oh, I didn't see Marshall's on as well. Hi, Marshall.
Hey, Marielle.
Hello.
Is Junior in bed?
No, neither is the little one because dad's on a call at the same time.
How old's the little one now?
6 months.
Oh, wow. Are you doing okay?
I'm managing.
Yeah.
I'm still
God
in one
bless you.
piece.
Yeah. How old's your older one? 2 years now?
2. Oh my gosh. No, he's 6.
Oh, well, he's supposed to take care of the 6-month-old.
And
Yeah.
he's going to do exactly that. That's his assignment for tonight. Watch his little sister.
Good for you.
Hi,
Marshall.
Aisha.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. I think we may
Good
need
evening, everybody.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we actually may have quorum. Do we? Maybe.
Is it
I always
5 or
forget.
6?
I always get confused.
Because I'm not sure if that one person was officially taken out for us to say that we could do 5 for quorum.
I'm not sure either. Let me check really quickly, and I'll let you know.
Real quick.
Chanel, can you promote Wayne to panelist?
Good eye. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah. We also have Curtis Young, who's the new Manhattan Borough advocate for Jamani Williams. Congratulations, Curtis.
Yep, I see. Yep, Curtis, and I also see Chris Espinosa from Assembly Member Manny de los Santos office as well, joining us this evening. And let me check on the quorum number really quickly. One moment.
Hey, Wayne. Is that it says Copacabana in your background tonight?
It's the Copacabana Palace, yes.
Ooh. Always bringing us surprises.
Yeah, I stayed next door. I didn't stay at the Copacabana Palace.
Oh,
Same view, lesser price, okay?
okay.
Great thinking. That's the way to do it.
Is
So
that in,
Emily,
is that
go
in
ahead,
Cuba?
Bruce.
No, Rio,
Oh, excuse me.
on Copacabana Beach.
Okay.
Okay, so we do have quorum. I did just check now.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get started. Great. Thank you, Chanel. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, committee members and community board members. Good evening, members of the public. Good evening, our invited guests. I hope you're all well. Today's February 2nd. Can't believe it's already February. I'm like, wait, that happened really fast. But here we are with our monthly Housing and Human Services Committee this evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. I'm going to ask if the members of the Housing and Human Services Committee can briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the agenda for this evening. We do have a packed but exciting agenda where we've had invited guests from Housing Preservation and Development that will be joining us and talking about the Alternative Enforcement Program. We're also going to be joined later this evening by colleagues from Met Council for a short presentation, and then we have a couple of items under old business and new business. So a packed agenda, but a good agenda. So with that, I'll briefly introduce myself. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Marielle Ali, and I am the chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee. And I've been on the community board since 2020 with a brief hiatus, but I'm back. And I'll turn it over to Emily.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Marte. I'm co-chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee. I am a fairly new member of the community board, and I hopped on to this committee right as I joined. So I'm learning a lot in housing. I'm here learning with you guys, and I'm open to any suggestions as well. I think I'll popcorn it over to someone else, to Bruce.
Hi, Bruce Robertson, Community Board, about 3 years, also on Traffic and Transportation. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call on people. Marshall?
Yes, I'm Marshall Vanderpool, and I'm a public member of the committee, formerly first vice president of the Dyckman Resident Association, New York City Housing Authority.
Welcome. Jay?
Hi, Jay Bias, board member since last year of May. Thank you for having me. I just got home, sorry.
Oh, yeah, no worries. We get it. Aisha?
Hi, I'm Aisha Ogilvy. I've been a board member since April of 2013. I'm also on the Land Use Committee, chaired by Wayne Benjamin, who we have here tonight.
Nice. And Michelle?
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Lee. I'm on the Housing and Human Services Committee.
Welcome. All right, I think that's all our members. And then
I think so. Oh, it looks like Richard is joining us
Right.
right in time. It looks like you're connecting
Oh,
to
yeah.
audio.
Richard always connects right on time.
Literally. Good evening, Richard. We're just doing a brief round of introductions before we turn it over to HPD for presentation. Over to you.
Oh, you're on mute.
Richard is always muting himself.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with humility. I'm Richard Allman. I'm a member of the community board for something around 12 years, give or take a little bit. I serve on this committee and on the aging committee. There's a history as a tenant organizer and in working with affordable housing organizations. And my current work is operating a senior center.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand it over to our HPD colleagues. Again, thank you for joining us. Please take a moment to introduce yourselves, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Defina. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for HPD's Division of Special Enforcement. I'm here with Anastasia Hanna. She's a community coordinator who's responsible for oversight of AEP buildings that are in Community Board 12. She's probably most familiar. Anastasia, do you want to say anything? Say hi or introduce yourself? Okay. So just to let you know, I'm not sure how familiar or how, I know I don't have that much time. So just to give a broad overview of HPD's enforcement and neighborhood services, it's an office within HPD that has code enforcement, which is the borough housing inspectors. They are primarily responsible for responding to 311 complaints. Then we have the Office of Emergency Operation Divisions. They're the division that deals with emergency repairs. So if there's no heat, they're the part of the agency that sends CPMs, construction project managers, out to buildings. They scope jobs. We do emergency repairs to basically stop any immediate hazard. Then we have the Division of Special Enforcement, which is my division. I'll go into a little bit more depth about that in a few minutes. But then we have the Housing Litigation Division, which brings litigation against landlords in court. We have the Division of Neighborhood Preservation that actually works with landlords and tenants. It's more of a softer touch than some of the other divisions. But those are the major divisions within the Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services. The division that I oversee includes the Alternative Enforcement Program, which we will talk more about, the Emergency Response Unit, which are the inspectors that work late hours. My inspectors work till midnight, 7 days a week. So if you have any tenants who are in your community board that say the landlord isn't giving them heat at a certain time, you could let us know. We'll schedule an inspection. We'll do inspections up until midnight. Which does sometimes happen. I also have the anti-harassment unit, which is a relatively new unit. And we do inspections for buildings where we believe landlords are harassing tenants by depriving them of maintenance conditions and not fixing things. So there's many types of harassment. So we do where there is maintenance as harassment issues, where the landlord's just not providing heat and repeating, not giving services to tenants or not giving services to the rent stabilized tenants in his building. We have a unit that basically performs roof to cellar inspections. We refer cases to litigation. These inspectors are a little different because they, do a little bit more interviewing of tenants. That unit, the anti-harassment unit, also works with the state attorney general, the Department of Buildings. We have a city task force, a state task force, and we perform weekly inspections with the task force. And on those buildings, we look at like large portfolios where there's a combination of issues, where it's not just maintenance as harassment, but it's where there's issues regarding leases. That's why we have HCR as a partner, where there's, construction as harassment. That's why DOB is there. The AG brings, all the full force of the AG, where we've issued subpoenas. So we have a number of people. Health department will come out on those inspections if we need them. So that's the anti-harassment unit. And then the other unit that's within my division is the 7A program. And that's the program where either we would initiate or tenants could initiate a 7A action. And basically what that means is we're asking the judge to remove management from the owner. We don't take away the ownership of the buildings in 7A doesn't change. The owner retains ownership. However, they're no longer able to manage the building. So that being said, let me just talk a little bit more now into AEP. So AEP is 16 years old. We just ran our 16th round, January 31st, just the other day. And AEP was designed, it was a statute designed to get at the repeat users of our enforcement activity. So 17 years ago, we were saying that landlords would let us do emergency repairs, or they would patch the repairs, but never do the long-term, making the long-term repair that was needed for the building. So a perfect example would be a roof leak. So prior to AEP, you would have a building that the roof would leak. We would inspect the apartment. We'd write the violation. Either the landlord would patch the roof where it was leaking and the violation would get wiped away, or HPD through our emergency repair program would patch the roof to address the immediate hazard. And then what we would find is a couple months later, it would either start leaking in another location or the same leak would come back and we'd be back in the same apartment. So the whole point of AEP is to get at repeat users of our enforcement activity. We focus on multiple dwellings. There is a small portion of 3 to 9 unit buildings, but we are really looking at larger buildings that have violations issued in the past 5 years, and not only a high number of violations, but also a large amount of emergency repair spending. So it's buildings where we've spent emergency repairs, we've issued numbers of violations, and they haven't been corrected. So those owners, every January 31st, those owners get notice that their building's put into the program, and basically that they have 4 months to get their building discharged by meeting substantial compliance. So substantial compliance means they must correct 100% of their heat and hot water violations, 100% of their mold C violations. Wait, hold on. 80% of mold B, 80% of vermin, and then 80% of all other B and C violations. They have to register the building with HPD, and they have to either pay off all their charges with Department of Finance or enter into a payment agreement to pay off their charges. For building owners that do that within the first 4 months of the program, We discharge the building from AEP, but then our Division of Neighborhood Preservation will monitor it for a year to try to avoid the buildings from coming back, to stay on top of it. If the building starts to slip into disrepair, they would refer it to litigation. For buildings that don't get out now within the first 4 months, what we do is we issue, the owner gets issued a failure to discharge letter. And basically what we do is we perform a roof to cellar inspection and we issue an order to correct. And at that point, we tell the landlord what system replacement work, if any, has to be done. So we will issue an order that basically says you have to replace your roof, replace your boiler, point the whole exterior of your building, replace the waste lines. It could be a number of systems. It really depends on what our construction project manager sees. There's also, after that 4 months passes, where if the owner doesn't get discharged, it's also very fee heavy. And that's to encourage compliance with the law. So for example, after 4 months, if the building doesn't get discharged, there's a $500 per dwelling unit fee that gets imposed right off the top. And that's basically for us to monitor for the next 6 months of us monitoring. After that period of time, 6 months from that date, there's a second $500 per dwelling unit fee. So there's an initial inspection fee basically of $1,000 per unit. There's also a $200 complaint inspection fee. So any tenant in an AEP building that calls 311, as a result of that 311 call, if we AEP inspects, we issue a violation, it's a $200 complaint inspection fee. There's also a $100 false certification inspection fee. All these fees get charged to the owner through the Department of Finance, and if not paid, become a lien against the property. AEP, just so you know how the unit is set up, it consists of housing inspectors, construction project managers, and community coordinators. The role of the housing inspector is to make sure that violations are issued. When we need to re-inspect, if violations that are corrected or removed, the inspector does that. The construction project manager is responsible for monitoring any contractors that HPD has working in the building, as well as monitoring the landlord's work. The community coordinator, which Anastasia is a community coordinator for AEP for quite some time now. The community coordinator is basically responsible for making sure the landlord and tenants are provided with notice about AEP and updates on their building being in the program throughout the whole process. So I know you're interested in 2 buildings in particular. So let me just say, so 705 West 170th. I don't know if you have any questions. You want me to stop and then I'll talk about those 2 buildings?
If we can, thank you so much for that overview. Really helpful for us to kind of learn a little bit more about obviously the HPD remit, but also the program itself. If I can just take a quick moment just to acknowledge, just in case there are kind of people watching online or watching the recording later on, I do want to just briefly acknowledge Curtis Young from the Public Advocate's Office, and then I know we also have 1 or 2 elected officials. So Curtis, over to you really quickly, and then after everyone kind of says their hellos, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure.
Grace, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be home at CB12. As you know, I recently started with the Public Advocate's Office after taking a hiatus from the community board. I'm back in action, working as the Manhattan Borough Advocate. As you know, the Public Advocate has a housing unit and publishes the worst landlord list each year. So I'm here to listen and to learn about the issues in CB12, particularly from your committee that's doing great work, and see if I can be of service in the future. My email address is cyoung@advocate.nyc.gov. Once again, that's CYOUNG@advocate.gov. I'll go offline and take my video off, but I'm here to listen and to learn. But please feel free to contact me if you have any issues that you would like to escalate to our office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Curtis. I know that we also had a representative, I think it was Jamila from City Council Member de la Rosa's office, but I think she may have had to step away. And then we also have a representative from Assembly Member de Los Santos office as well on the line. So just again, for people who may be listening in. Thank you and apologies for that, Grace. Over to you.
Sure, no problem. So just going to 705 West 170th and 709 West 170th. Both buildings were part of the anti-harassment unit back in May of 2021. We performed roof to cellar inspections in May of 2021 on both buildings. And in August of 2021, comprehensive litigation was initiated. Let me just see. So I'm just going to stick with 705 for now. So the building, as a result of the anti-harassment unit housing inspection, the building was then selected for AEP on January 31st, 2022. The AEP order to correct, it orders the landlord to point the exterior of the building. It's AEP's belief that leaks and mold are coming from the exterior walls and they're in need of pointing. A consent order and civil penalties were obtained in May of 2022. However, we don't believe that the owner was in compliance and we're currently in housing court seeking contempt. During the time we had an interim consent order in early December that just passed, where the owner agreed to provide automatic fuel drops each time the build devices that supplied heat and hot water were in at capacity. They also agreed to hire supers and a managing agent for the buildings by December 31st, 2022, and to produce a comprehensive scope of work. We have right now at that building, $86,000 has been billed to the owner for repair work performed by HPD. So that both buildings are subject to litigation, not just comprehensive litigation, but it was comprehensive litigation where we feel that they didn't do what they were supposed to as a result of that litigation. And that's why the agency is seeking like supplemental cases, seeking contempt. For 709 West 170th, again, they were part of the initial inspection performed by the anti-harassment unit in May 2021. Again, comprehensive litigation in August 2021. We got an order, civil penalties in May of 2022. But again, same thing, we're seeking contempt in that as well. Let me just see. For that building, $74,000 have been billed to the owner for repair work performed by HPD. The newest update with respect to 709 West 170th, it met the criteria for AEP. So it is now in AEP round 16. That list just came out on January 31st. So the building's posted, owner was just provided with notice. So now he has this additional, he'll have the additional burden of having to get out of AEP.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for giving us that background on those two buildings. As you mentioned, those are kind of two buildings that we've been looking into. And we did have some tenants join our meeting in December where they raised some of the concerns with a colleague at the Department of Buildings. I do want to acknowledge that we have 3 hands up. I believe, I'm not sure if this is the right order, but I believe I saw Wayne, Bruce, and then Aisha. So Wayne, I'll hand it over to you for your question. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a quick question for you. You mentioned that on occasion, I guess your HPD will go through and do sort of a roof to cellar inspection and say you have to, replace this, fix that. Does HPD also provide the property owners with any type of financial assistance like the 8A loan program, if that still exists, or others to help them finance it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we do, so as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the divisions within the Division of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services is the Division of Neighborhood Preservation. And I mentioned that's more of the softer touch. That's a division that where if an owner expresses like a willingness to work with the agency, they want to do the right thing. They might have some issues with, getting access to certain apartments, or they might be interested in a loan program. That's something that our Division of Neighborhood Preservation will work with owners. In these two buildings in particular, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing an owner who is willing to, work with us, wanting to do the right thing by the tenants. That's not what we're seeing. And that's why our anti-harassment unit really is looking not just at these two buildings, but their entire portfolio. And that's why we took the approach that we did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Bruce, over to you.
Wow, you guys do a lot. Thank you. How does it go forward with these two buildings where they owe a lot of money? In the past, we've heard that some landlords say, well, I don't care about the fees and the fines. It's cheaper than just trying to fix the problem. And they just let it go for a while. Is there anything new that you're doing now that you haven't done in the past under the Adams administration with HPD to get these landlords to commit?
I mean, we're constantly looking at new ways to go after landlords that aren't doing the right thing. One of the things that's one of the newer things that we do is really working with the other agencies. So it's not just, a bad landlord, let's say, who's not doing the right thing and just dealing with one agency. Like you have the whole point of the task force is to bring the full force of the whole city, the Department of Buildings. So it's not just HPD violations. They're dealing with Department of Buildings violations, possibly, subpoenas from the Attorney General's office, where, we're looking at every angle that the city can look at from an enforcement perspective.
So that's a new approach, the task force, right?
What?
The task force is a new approach in the past year or
It's
two.
a relative approach. It's not like brand new under the Adams administration, but it continues. It continues, and we continue to get support to do the work that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Over to you, Aisha.
Hi. So to begin with, I just want to express gratitude that we are at least at this point. These two buildings I brought to the community board because they are right across the street from me. I know the buildings intimately and the people that live in them, and have watched the struggles that they've gone through, but also watch how they've bonded together in order to support each other in the absence of appropriate management. Something that I've wanted to understand is what is you've shared with us the timeline of when things have happened, and I wasn't aware of some of that, and that those things are great. The financial penalties to the landlord, unfortunately, are not helping the people to live in a habitable building. I know some repairs have been done, but seemingly not all. And so there's still distress. So my question is what is the agency's responsibility timeline wise? Because it seems to me that we are at least in 2 years, according to your own statements, that this has been going on, and yet there's still stressors there.
So to alleviate any immediate hazards, that's why we have spent the money we have doing emergency repairs. So any immediate emergency, we have performed emergency repair work, whether that's on mold, leaks, lead, any lead-based paint, that we would attempt to go in and do the work to address the immediate hazard. But we are just want to also mention with these two buildings, we are looking at the whole portfolio, and we are hoping that as pressure increases from multiple city agencies against not just these two buildings, but buildings that are in poor condition throughout their whole portfolio, that we will see a change. You know, sometimes these things take time. I know it's not what everybody wants to hear, but I've been with the agency for 21 years, and I've seen good outcomes come from the enforcement work that we do. So I think the tenants should continue to call 311. I hope that the increased pressure of AEP and all the fees that will be imposed on the building shortly will make a difference, as well as our continued legal litigation. But in the meantime, if there's any issue that the tenants have, Anastasia's on this call. She's the community coordinator for the building. First, if there's any issue that the tenants have, they should definitely notify their landlord, but also if the landlord doesn't fix it, report it to 311 so there's a record of it. And then they should be in contact with Anastasia. And as updates happen, more so with 709, AEP would be willing to meet with the tenants at the building and answer any questions they might have.
And has Anastasia's information been provided to the tenants? Because I've heard that they feel very disconnected from the agency and feel unaware of where things are in the process. I have met some inspectors on the sidewalk as they're entering the building and had conversations with them, so that I could try to, have an understanding of where things are, but also by pushing through the community board as well. But what I want to put on the table also is that there are people already they're small buildings, but there are already people being displaced. Some due to health issues that I will not specify, but egregious effects due to the conditions in these buildings. I'm concerned that, we have people looking for housing in other places when they have a place to live that unfortunately is in disrepair. So what can we do to address?
Why don't you, I'll give you my phone number and my email. And if you want, if there's certain apartments that you're concerned, especially concerned about, we can set up an inspection with an inspector and a CPM to make sure that if there's a condition that we don't know of that's dangerous, it could be documented. And if we need to fix it, we'll fix it through our emergency repair program if the landlord doesn't do it. And again, Anastasia for 709, that building just got put into AEP. So they, I don't know if she got to that building yet, but what typically happens is the coordinator will go to the building, introduce themselves, and leave all the tenants their contact information. So even though the inspectors are there, their role is really to perform inspections, re-inspections. It's really the role of the coordinator to talk to both the landlord and the tenants and make sure that they know what's going on. So I don't know, Anastasia, if you want to add anything to this, but if you want to, schedule a meeting to meet with some of the tenants or walk the building with you, I think we're open to doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Grace. I think I see another hand. Aisha, I'm assuming that's the hand that you just had up, but I also want to acknowledge that. Okay. I also want to acknowledge that again, we do have some representatives from elected officials in case they want to share anything, but also if there's anyone from the public that has a comment or would like to ask a question, please raise your hand.
Well, in the chat, there's a question if Grace and Anastasia could place their contact information in the chat.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm. I do have one question. Now that I heard the process that HPD has to undergo to solve an issue, and then hearing when tenants were talking about the conditions that they were living in and for how long. I know that you guys are making changes to expedite things, but it just sounded like it was a never-ending hell for them, and I'm not too sure if things are being done because we had been told, I think it was from Department of Buildings, from whatever she did know, because she didn't quite know about the process that you all do. But it just seemed like it was a very long time for them to get like the slightest repair, any response. So I'm not sure if something is being done about that. I mean, now that I hear the timeline, I'm like, okay, I see you guys have a process, but it just seemed like very long time for them to get even like recognized about this.
You know, just to point out though, like I said, we did our inspection of May of 2021, and we had referred it for litigation in August, which again, we can't, just so you know, we have to refer, when we refer a case for litigation, the violations can't be still pending. So every time when we issue a violation, there's a statutory repair, a time period that the landlord by law is given to repair. So, you know, C-class violations are obviously shorter because it's immediately hazardous. A-class violations are non-hazardous. They're given more time. We wait until the violations are overdue to make sure that we could say, we issued the violations. We gave the landlord the chance by law, the opportunity, the time provided by law to do the repairs. He didn't do it, and we referred it to litigation. So in this case, we did refer to litigation quickly, but throughout this whole entire time, we have been doing any emergency repair to address any immediate hazard. So we've continued to write violations. So even though we had the litigation, it didn't mean any enforcement activity stopped. In fact, on 705, they were already in charge $21,000 in just an initial inspection fee. That's not even in addition to the charges for the complaint inspection fees or the full certification fees or the civil penalties that were imposed in court. I mean, unfortunately, like this is, you know, we're throwing a lot of our tools at it. I wish we could say things happened quickly. Like I said, we got the consent order in court and they said they were going to do everything. And we did not believe they complied with the consent order. And that's why we went back for contempt, because we weren't happy with what they did under their agreement. But again, throughout this whole time, we have been, and we still are, committed to making sure that any tenant, that if there's an immediate hazardous condition, that's addressed. So if there's any issue that for whatever reason, sometimes like I said, I've been doing this for a while, sometimes tenants, don't always report conditions, but if there's anything that they might have told you, but they didn't want to report to the city, we would encourage them to report it to 311, let us know. Or if you want us to do an inspection of certain apartments, let Anastasia know, let me know, and we'll make the arrangements. We really are committed to helping the tenants and getting conditions fixed, especially, like I said, any immediate emergency. We have been doing it, and we've been spending the money doing the small repairs. But, I know that's not what the tenants want. I know that's not what we want. We want the long-term fix. And I feel like it has been a while, but I'm still, optimistic that we're going to get there, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we're very committed to the tenants. So whatever you guys need as far as inspections, if there's anything, tenant meetings, we'll go door to door and talk to the tenants with you, or even if you can't do it, we could do it with our coordinator.
Thank you, Grace. And I want to recognize Jay first, if that's okay, Aisha, since Jay hasn't spoken, and then we'll turn it back over to you. Thanks. Go ahead, Jay.
Hello. I just had a few questions. So I understand you said that the owner agreed to hire a super management by the end of December.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was done for the tenants.
Anastasia, can you talk to that? I know there was other things they agreed to that they didn't do. So that was why we went back to court and said you weren't in compliance with the consent order.
And that this was a part of it?
That was part of the consent order. Again, whether they agreed to that specifically, I don't know offhand, but I could try to get that information for you.
Okay, no, that's fine.
And so I guess up to what point do you get to the step where you put this as a lien on their property?
Any charge that is any of the inspection fees and any of the emergency repair charges that we've charged the owner, everything gets billed through the Department of Finance. And on the second statement of account, when it becomes due and payable, that's when it becomes a lien against the property.
And at least through, I know you have to go through the court process, but
Not for the emergency repairs. We're going through the court process on the violations.
right. And so when we're talking about the pointing that they have to do, because that's the underlying condition, at what point will HPD step in and just take over that work and bill the owner entirely for that?
So we do have the option of doing that. However, when there's an active landlord, we go through litigation, because reality is we're gonna get ready to do the work and most likely be refused access, and we'll be back in court. So it usually, if there's an active landlord, we try to compel the work through housing court.
And I guess my last question, I think, if it wasn't for this program, there's a lot of things that would just fly by, the way owners treat tenants in this city. But at the same time, has there ever been a proposal that adds more teeth to your work that, I don't know, take the building away from this owner in a court case or something? This is obviously you have a list of like 200 buildings, right? This is so common that at this point, why isn't there some proposal from the city to address this issue of owners not complying with clear violations? They have one job, right? They want to make a profit, and all they have to do is maintain habitability inside these units. That's the job.
Yeah. So one of the programs that I oversee is the 7A program. And it's a program that basically doesn't take ownership away from the owner, but it takes management and control away from the owner. And basically in those buildings, a landlord, if it's usually a long process because it's a court process. But if we're successful, what we seek a 7A administrator. And if we're successful, basically the judge tells the owner, you're no longer allowed to control your building. Control of the building is given to an administrator where they collect the rent, they make the repairs, and they have the ability to come to HPD for a loan to do major work against, major capital work for the building. Those cases are usually reserved for the most egregious cases where there's really conditions dangerous to life, health, and safety, or conditions of abandonment. But that's one of our enforcement tools. We've also in the past, as part of contempt, we've sought criminal contempt. We've had landlords arrested. One not that long ago was arrested in Brooklyn and held at Rikers for a short amount of time, I think a couple days or a week, for not doing what he was supposed to do and for being in contempt of court.
And I guess for the 7A program, you're saying that this building, at least 705, which has been an AAP for a bit, is not up to that eligibility.
It's been an AEP for a year. And like you said, the one thing you did mention was the pointing, which is something that having HPD do the pointing, having AEP do the pointing, that is something that we could definitely address, most likely, especially if this contempt case doesn't, if we're not successful after seeking contempt. But pointing work would have to be done in the spring anyway, when the weather is warmer. Pointing, roof work and pointing is not something we do in the winter. So like I said, the order was issued last year. last summer. They didn't do what they were supposed to. We brought litigation, we brought, we have contempt cases now. So having HPD perform the work, it's definitely an option that'll be on the table in the spring. If this contempt case, we don't see improvement with the results of the contempt case.
And the last question, I guess, for hopefully there's some tenants here from these buildings, but the last question would be, do you have a timeline on the court cases that you're?
I'll follow up after this meeting. I'll follow up with our litigation probably this week or not. Yeah, I'll follow up with them tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Jay. And thank you, Grace. I mean, I think Jay, you have a good point about, is there something that, maybe city council can do, maybe some kind of legislation on how we can further strengthen this program and kind of really hold the landlord's feet to the fire, as they say. But before I turn it over to you, Aisha, I did see Anastasia, you had your hand up. I'm not sure if you wanted to come in first, so I'll just give you a moment.
She did say that her audio, something was off with it, that she can't get off mute. I asked her to call in. I'm not sure if she's able to do that though.
Okay.
It seems like her audio is off. In the chat she wrote that she can't speak.
Okay. Also happy for you to kind of type in your response and we can make sure that we can read it out loud as well. So with that then, over to you, Aisha, for your comment, and then Michelle. And we probably have another 10 minutes or so because we do have a presentation at 8. So I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Aisha, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, and I think Anastasia might be on the phone now. I just wanted to quickly say, first of all, I reached out to 2 of the tenants there. Their buildings are organized now. Sikis Chavez is in the queue, I believe, if she could be elevated. She is one of the tenants of one of the buildings. I wanted to speak to the siloing that seems to exist between DOB and HPD. DOB appeared due to emergency call that was made because bricks were falling off of the roof of one of the buildings. And when they came, we had a discussion and we started to point out some of the other major issues that were taking place. At one point, the septic from 705 was overflowing. It could be smelled from the sidewalk. And DOB's response was, you got to call HPD. Mm-hmm. And so it's my opinion that they should be a mandated reporter. Any side of your agency should be a mandated reporter to the other in the event that they witness something or that they're being informed something, because these tenants had already been calling 311 to no avail. And so I just want to also reiterate my request. And I know you've answered it via saying we're working on this, we're doing that. But what I would like for this committee to have is knowledge of the exact timeline that the agencies, both agencies, are required to commit to in regards to their surveillance of the problem. What is the timeline that the landlord is given? What is the timeline that the city is required to respond, so that we can be aware of that when we're advocating for our district, but also, to be empowered with the knowledge to advocate, whether it be through our budget ranking process, so that we can understand how the agency functions and, just be able to support our community better with that information. So if you could provide us that would be great.
Thanks, Aisha. Grace, if it's okay, before you respond, I'll hand it over to Michelle, who's also a committee member as well.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for attending. And I've just learned a lot listening to your presentation. So thanks for coming and sharing with us about the AEP program. My question is, if I hear of somebody who does not have access to heating or water, what are the steps that they should take, the early steps that they should take to start the process of getting this situation rectified?
So if there's any maintenance issue in any building across New York City, the first thing a tenant should do is notify their landlord, and then report it to 311. Tenants can look on HPD online, they'll get a complaint number, they could track their complaint. If it's a heat complaint, we triage those in the winter. Certain complaints will be given priority. For example, a cascading water leak, that's why we have those emergency response unit inspectors that I mentioned that work till midnight. They're basically on call to respond to dire emergencies where you have a building that has like no water supply to the whole building, or electric went out to the whole building, or, cases that are very serious. They also do the hot water inspections at night when tenants request them late at night. But basically document the complaint, and then HPD will inspect, and if warranted, a violation will be issued. Everything that we do is available to the public online through HPD Online on our website.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Grace. And just kind of noting kind of Aisha's question from earlier, if that's one for you to kind of come back on.
Yeah, just let me know the address. I actually have my computer up and it just died. But I could look your complaint about the septic tank. What was that, for 705 or 709?
That was 705.
Okay. I'll look into it. That's a complaint that if we got, should have been addressed pretty quickly. Just so you know, when we see certain conditions that involve DOB issues, our inspectors are trained to call 311 from the field and report it to DOB via 311 right then and there.
Okay. That wasn't the response I got from DOB that day.
Yeah. And like I said, we do, AEP works very closely because AEP is within my division, as well as the anti-harassment unit. Our coordination with DOB, Department of Health, the state HCR is really, like I said, I mentioned before, I've been with the agency for, quite some time. I don't think relationships between the agencies have ever been better. We're often on the phone with DOB, throughout the week on a whole host of issues.
Okay, good.
But I'm going to look
Thank
into the complaint that was made and just see if I find anything. I'll let you know.
Can we recognize? Thank you. Can we recognize?
I was just about to. Just one second, Aisha. Thank you both. Before I do that really quickly, I also want to note that there's a lot of contact information being shared in the chat for those who want to follow up with any either our HPD colleagues or some of the elected officials and their offices. They're there. I do, just to Aisha's exact point, I think we should recognize Sikis if you would like to say anything. And please correct me if I mispronounced your name. Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Let me try to unmute you. One second.
Hi,
Okay.
how are you? My name is Sikis. You pronounced it right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. So I feel like this is never ending. I live in 709. It's part of 709, 705. We have the same landlord. We actually came out in the news as the #1 worst landlord in New York, and still nothing is being done. We keep putting complaints in after complaints after complaints to 311. All that's been happening is the inspectors come in, take pictures, write a summons, leave, and we never hear back from them again. So right now, the way we're feeling is like everybody, HPD, DOB, everybody just forgot about us. We're actually even a few of our tenants are actually in court right now as we speak with the landlord. They know that the landlord doesn't live in New York. So the lawyers act like the landlord is sick, and they just make her come through a Zoom meeting. The representative of whoever it is that the landlord is, Robin, They make her come through a Zoom. They act like she's sick. They act like she lives in New York, even though she's in California. So, and nothing ever happens. The court cases get adjourned for like months later, and then the same thing happens when the tenants go to court again. So it's like we're just sad at this point. I don't even know how. I feel like I keep having the same discussion over and over again.
So I'm so sorry for what you've been going through.
Thank you.
I only imagine how frustrating it must be to be a tenant in one of these buildings, only because from our perspective, it's frustrating too, because there's a lot of resources that the city's dedicating to this to make sure that conditions do get addressed. And it's been a while. If you heard, like I said, we started with our anti-harassment unit in 2021 and started litigation just a couple months after. We're in contact with a number of different agencies and looking, at this, not just these buildings, but the buildings across the portfolio, to see what all the pressure and all the effort we could do to get conditions changed. Things are dragging out in court, which is a result of just process, right? Like we've spent a lot of time in court, then consent orders, we're back in court now on contempt. I guess my message to you and the tenants would be, just don't give up. We've seen success in the past. And we are committed to helping you guys, all of you. The tenants in your building, as well as the tenants in all of the rest of the portfolio. There's a lot of people who, we're always talking about, again, not just this building, but the portfolio. And it's across a lot of different agencies. The landlord, your building 709 just got put into the alternative enforcement program on January 31st. So I think the building was posted today. Anastasia Hanna, who's on this call, but having issues with accessing the voice. She's unable to communicate. She will reach out to you. She'll meet with the tenants. She'll give you, an in-depth explanation of AEP and what's involved. And then, I'm really hopeful that, in the next few months, you'll see improvement, but just please don't give up.
We're trying not to. I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Like, we're trying not to. We're staying, we're organized. We're stronger now because the past year, since everything got really, really bad, these past 2 years, we've gotten closer together and we've organized better. We have weekly meetings with each other, but then it gets underwhelming because we see no changes at all. Like just the other day, a pipe burst in 705, which caused a leak to several apartments, and it took forever to fix. Like one of the tenants didn't have water for almost 3 weeks just because of this pipe bursting that could have been probably fixed right away if we had a super and maintenance people that could just fix it right away. But instead, the super put the pipe to put the pipe out the window so that the water could go out the window instead of just fixing it. It's been a nightmare.
So if you want us to come to one of your meetings with the tenants, we will,
Okay.
So the tenants, if it's your meeting with the tenants of 705 and 709, you mentioned if you want, contact Anastasia, and we'll be happy to come to your meeting and discuss the issues with you, and we'll bring an inspector. So if there's anything you want us to see firsthand, or if it's a new issue, we'll document it. Whatever questions you have, we could just address there with the tenants.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I'll let it's usually through Zoom since we have nowhere to really meet, but that would be wonderful. We would really appreciate that.
I'm more than happy to come to a meeting, even in the evening. We could meet in the lobby, so that way anytime you want to come and show us something specific, we'll go look at.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you both. I think I managed to promote Anastasia. One just really quickly, Aisha, and then excuse me, I want to make sure Anastasia has a chance to speak. Go ahead.
In land use yesterday, I believe the owner of the new hotel that was built on 181st in Amsterdam spoke about the fact that that space has been offered to the community board in order to have meetings, but since we are not hybrid and we're not in person, we have not utilized that. So he asked about that. And so one of the things that I said to him is maybe entities or groups that need space, like for instance, this tenant organization to hold meetings, that maybe they can utilize it in our absence until we are prepared. And he was friendly to that and told me to reach out to him. So maybe we can set them up with that, because their buildings are very small. The hallway is very small. There really is no real meeting space in the building. But of course, you know, HPD going to the building is a separate matter.
All right. Thank you, Aisha.
Well, we're all, you know, whatever you guys, whatever the tenants, you know, whatever is best for them.
Great. And you know, kind of the contact information has been put in the chat. So do make sure that you kind of jot that down. I believe
Okay.
I've unmuted Anastasia. Just want to give you a moment
Can
on
you
the
hear me?
line. Yes, we can hear you.
Yay! I've only been trying since 7.
Oh,
Hello,
thanks for
everybody.
hanging
I'm
on.
the community coordinator. I'm your community coordinator for 709, and I also inherited 705 recently. As the new round started, we switched boroughs, a few of us, and switched some buildings. So now I'm responsible for 705 and like Grace said, 709 just came into the program. So we just posted it yesterday. We haven't had a moment to get inside the building to start really speaking with the tenants, meeting the tenants, going apartment to apartment. The goal is to start that on Monday. We're still posting all of our buildings because we did receive 30 some odd new buildings. So expect to see us in the buildings, knocking on doors, introducing ourselves, giving you information about the alternative enforcement program. And while we're in there, if people have problems, they'll probably point them out to us. I'll have my inspector with me. He'll be writing violations, and hopefully our CPM, our contract project manager, will be with us as well to take a look at what's going on. So expect us to be coming through probably Monday.
Thank you, Anastasia. I do just want to recognize one quick point in the chat, which is from Jamila from City Council member Carmen de la Rosa's office. She said that she can be of support as well for the tenant meeting. So again, another kind of way to kind of organize and work with all the different bodies to hopefully address some of these issues. You know, I think we're quite clear that no one should live in those types of conditions, and then that everyone's working, and we know the process is long. We know it's bureaucratic at times, but you know, no one should live in those conditions. So with that, I do just want to say a big thank you to both Grace and Anastasia for joining us this evening. This is the start of a conversation, not the end, and the start of a relationship. And we really do hope that we can continue to work closely with your office, not just in advocating, for these two buildings, but all of any kind of other buildings that fall within your remit in Washington Heights and Inwood, which unfortunately are too many. But as I've kind of mentioned before, we're here as a resource, and we're here to work together alongside you to address a lot of these issues. So thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us. Looking forward to working with you. Bye.
Same. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily. I know that you're going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, that from Met Council. So over to you, Emily. Thanks.
Thanks, Marielle. So I believe everyone received that email about the community conversation or event about rents being too high. So I went to the meeting, and I could debrief you on it a little bit like after in new business. But there I met Andrea Shapiro, who's here with us now. She's from Met Council on Housing, or Metropolitan Council on Housing. It's a tenants' rights membership organization. She's the director of programs and advocacy. Hi, Andrea, now I see you. And she's here to talk about Met Council and a few topics that we have mentioned in past meetings that could be relevant to people in regards to tenants. And maybe those that are in 705, 709 can hear a bit on this and learn some as well. So welcome, Andrea.
So much.
You can speak when you're ready.
And actually, we organize a lot with 709 and 705. Two of our organizers, I believe, are working with the Tenants Association.
Oh, nice. Well, look at that.
The connections are already well in existence for that building.
Great.
And great to see a lot of familiar faces and names.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hello. But for those of you who don't know who Met Council on Housing is, we are New York City's oldest tenants union, and we believe that all people deserve decent, stable, and affordable housing, and fight with tenants for that to happen. So we believe that the only way for us to win is by organizing tenants, both in tenants associations as well as tenants throughout the city. And we know that somewhat post-COVID, whatever you want to call this time in the world we're in, a lot of people can't afford their rents, right? Even prior to COVID, we know that half of New Yorkers were rent burdened, and that number has only gone up. And that there's something like 50,000 families that are facing eviction, over 104,000 homeless students in New York City schools. And we feel it in our everyday lives in New York. It's everything we feel in how we make choices, where we live, who we live with. And it's not right. It doesn't have to be this way. In 2019, many folks in this group actually, were really useful in fighting with us in Albany, and changing the law, making big dents in the number of evictions. And now it's time that we complete the job. And we need to pass something called good cause eviction, which would help prevent unregulated tenants being evicted for no reason and huge rent increases for them. And this is not a new concept. It's not a radical concept. It's good enough for New Jersey. It's good enough for Oregon. It's good enough for California and Washington. So if the West Coast can have it, why can't we? And if Jersey can have it, we can definitely do it. And we also need to make sure that once we can keep people in their home, people can actually afford their rents. And so we need a statewide voucher program called the Housing Access Voucher Program that would help pay people's rent, particularly people who are undocumented, people who are coming out of prison and jail, who have problems getting regular vouchers, as well as making sure there are vouchers for people who are both in homeless shelters, as well as people who are just facing eviction. And then we want to change the rent guidelines board system. Many of us, especially in Inwood, which has the highest amount of rent stabilized tenants in New York City, are about to face a 5% rent increase for a 2-year lease, which is the lease that most people take. This is the highest rent increase since Bloomberg. So it's been a really long time. Mayor Adams came in and did huge rent increases after years of rent freezes. And people who are already rent burdened can't face 5% rent increase. So we need to reform the system to change who's on the board, to lower the amount of people on the board so that they actually have to listen to tenants and landlords, as well as change who's appointed and how they're appointed, so that the city council and us have more power. And then finally, we need to change our system of housing so that we have more social housing in New York, housing that's limited equity, that's from nonprofits, that's community controlled and tenant controlled, that we have control over our own housing. It's something we've done in New York in the past and we can do moving forward, because we know that when tenants are in charge, we're going to make better decisions than landlords. right? As was pointed out in 709, 705, their landlords somewhere else, right? They don't care. They don't know what's going on. But tenants who have control can actually say, we need to fix this because we're living here. And so we need the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act and Social Housing Development Authority so that we can actually change the housing stock in New York and live better lives. And so these bills we're hoping to get passed as part of the budget process this year. And I can put a flyer in the chat for everyone about them. And we know the governor has been saying she wants to do something big on housing this year. Maybe me and the governor and Housing Just for All of my council don't see quite eye to eye on what we think is good for housing. But we know that a lot of the elected officials, including specifically Robert Jackson, definitely agree with us. That we can't just say we're going to build on the future. We need to give protections now. And the best way to do that is with Good Cause and the Housing Access Voucher Program. And I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions. Yes, Aisha?
So thank you so much. I'm definitely in support of this. My question is in regards to what can we do? This committee actually did pass a very robust resolution that I would have to look back at it for the specifics. It tackled a lot of the initiatives that came out of grassroots housing advocacy for a long time, and put it all together and put it before this board. I believe that good cause eviction was in that. I'm not exactly sure, but we did pass a resolution when I was chair for all 10 bills that we advocated for on the Hill in Albany. So what actions exist for community residents to be involved in the way that we did in the time of COVID, even though I know COVID is, as a state of emergency is coming to an end, what exists, what spaces exist that we can weigh in and support?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So definitely passing a resolution in favor of these 5 bills would be great. Also sharing out with the community members the link I just put in the chat, which allows them to send letters and calls to their elected officials to make sure they know how people support these 5 bills, as well as getting on the bus with us to Albany.
I'm there. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Aisha. Good question. That was going to be one of my questions. I had to step away for a moment, so apologies if I missed this. And I'm a bit newer to your work, so I'm very much a newbie, but learning. Do you offer anything like, I guess maybe workshops or resources for tenants who want to organize? I know that you did mention that you're working closely with some of the tenants in 705 and 709, but does that look like after once they've already established themselves, or it's kind of like, let's say there's a building, there are a couple of tenants, they're trying to address a particular issue, and maybe you offer some kind of trainings or workshops. So it's not easy to do it. So yeah, not sure if I'm phrasing the question, but I think
I think I understand enough.
Okay, thank you.
So we actually have reborn tenant organizing staff. We have 3 tenant organizers that are all working in Inland and Washington Heights. So we have lots of people who can help. So if you do know buildings, please send them our way. We're happy to meet with them, work with them. And another really good way for tenants to get information is to call our hotline, which I just put in the chat. And we can talk with them and assess whether they're good for organizing, whether that's what they're interested in, and get them connected to our organizers.
Great, thank you.
All right, any more questions? I was really excited to get Andrea here because I do advocacy work myself. And I know that it's one of the most difficult things, especially when people are not empowered at the moment, to face whoever's causing harm to them, violating their rights, especially when they're very busy, have families, multiple jobs. And that's usually something that happens in low-income communities or in these kinds of areas like ours. So I was really happy to have you here speak. And now that we have you recorded, then people could just check the YouTube. And thank you for providing the resources in the chat. So if nobody has any questions, let me just check real quick in the chat. Yeah, so it looks like nobody has anything in the Q&A either. Thank you very much, Andrea. Well, let me see. Oh, sorry. I missed you, Nick. Does Met Council currently offer? Oh yeah, that was the same one. Sorry, I didn't see that it was answered. Specific workshops for tenant organizations. Okay, that was the same question. I didn't know. Okay, it was answered, Nick. Well, yes, it looks like everything was answered. And she did put her information in the chat. I know that in the chat we can't copy paste anything, so just handwrite what's in there. And luckily it's short, all of the links and the numbers. So yeah, sorry about that. But thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us tonight. We really
Thank you
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Great to see all of you too.
Okay, so that's that. So if I guess we have no questions for that. So we're moving over to old business. And I see, I'm not sure in what order we want to do this, Mario, because I do see committee priorities and Fort Washington Armory, or was that a mistake? Or
No, those are both items under old business. But wonder if we could adjust the agenda slightly, just
I
because
could do new,
baby.
Sure. I'll do the updates on the conversations that we had with Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa and Sean Abreu. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm not too sure because I feel like we've spoken about it several times, but I think it was at the executive meeting. We met up with Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa and we spoke to her about, well, basically mentioning the priorities that we mentioned and the things that all the endeavors that we've had. And in the conversation, she's very involved with housing and residents. And they are thinking about how to create a safe space to advocate for individuals in our regions and the community to uplift people, empower them, and restructure governance. And she realizes that there's a big intersectionality of issues, and talked about like United Palace and everything. And she wanted to do like an inventory on where we are at, talk about, she talked about budget cuts and how we could still address things. And one of the things that she did also mention, because she gave us a lot of statistics that we weren't even aware of, that like we are the area with the highest amount of fires. So we did talk about displacement caused by fires in our district, because our district is the second highest in the city with fires. And there's a protocol for fires, but it should be discussed and somehow take feedback about it, because it just seems to be getting worse. So she's definitely on board with that. And was talking about infrastructure for legal services and mentioned NIMIC meeting that was needed for right to counsel, having nonprofits use multiple sources of funding to help people in different regions, depending on whether they qualify for the law and everything. So she was just giving us the rundown that, yes. And then also we spoke about funding for organizing being needed to help more buildings. So that's why I also brought over Met Council, because we do need tenants to speak up and community to get involved. She is interested because we did mention that we were going to have joint meetings with Health and Environment Committee on mental health and obviously there's a few things that could be addressed in mental health beyond housing, and also sanitation. So remember that next month we are going to have a meeting with the Health and Environment Committee on those topics. And that's the only reason why we've been pushing back the topic of the sanitation document that was sent by CB4. So that's when we will be discussing it. And she was definitely interested. And we also spoke about the Fort Washington Armory, and she was interested in that as well, and wanted to get a debrief on like what angle we were going on that. So that was with Carmen de la Rosa. And so she was very much on board. And then we had a short meeting with Sean Abreu. He spoke about, oh my gosh, my notes for this meeting were not as great, but I'll try and decipher them. But he was talking about how he's definitely on board for looking for true affordable housing, to add density and be aware of zoning. We spoke to him about Housing Connect through an HPD. He also mentioned free counsel services and legal services and how to amp that up, and working with other council members on that. Passing good cause eviction. So it was pretty much, it was similar, but he did put emphasis on a few things. And vamping up 21A, which is like the tax evasion for the landlords, Fortune 1A, and a few other things that I couldn't quite catch that because he was using a lot of acronyms. So I do have to like go into the internets and look for that. But he is very much on board as well, talking about HR voucher payments, HRA, and BEPS. I think that's what I wrote. It's a one-shot deal. Yeah, but then we also spoke to him about just meeting more regularly on these issues, because he's also very interested on doing some kind of a bill for education and protocols on fire, like not only on prevention, but just what tenants should do in the case that it happens, and also addressing like how the city should respond, something that's just more specific or that could address the issue better. So he was very much on board as well. So that's what I caught from those meetings. Not sure if you want to add anything else to this, Nariel.
No, not much more. You captured it succinctly. I mean, really, as we mentioned, the purpose of us meeting with them is one, not just to get their ideas on what are kind of, their stance on some of these issues, but also for us to share ours as the committee and kind of some of our priorities that we would like to address. And that was really helpful. It was clear that there is a lot of overlap. Both offices seemed very much on board with having more regular touch points. So as you have seen this evening, this is kind of maybe delving slowly into the other point on committee priorities, if that's all right. Where we did have some members from elected offices join us this evening for tonight's meeting, to kind of at least this committee be somewhat of a space where we help bring together the different stakeholders on some of these very important discussions that fall within the Housing and Human Services remit. As it relates to the committee priorities, I'm still working on a document, but Emily is supporting. Thank you, Emily, on kind of capturing the priorities that we all discussed last month. If you recall, you all gave some good feedback. But what ideally I would like to do is capture that, but also kind of juxtaposition it with the priorities of our city council members, and see kind of, again, where that overlap is in a very visual way, because it is there, again, through these conversations, as we've discovered. But then on the side of that, if you recall, one thing we talked about last month was about looking at the policy aspect. So what can we do? Is there kind of any legislation in city council that we can maybe write a resolution in support of? Do we need to kind of, have kind of more conversations or help convene some meetings around particular items or issues that, again, fall within our remit? to kind of get some of these conversations moving forward. In the case that Emily just mentioned, again, Councilmember Abreu was interested in doing some of that work around displacement of fires. And that's also something that Councilmember De La Rosa is also interested in. And I know, Aisha, that's something you're very passionate about as well. And so, again, there's an opportunity for some collaboration there and things that we can do together. So the idea is that this document would capture this. And then there would probably be a column of some sort that would say, okay, these are the things that are currently exist, the current, legislation, these are the, how it relates to kind of budgets and so on and so forth. But then also, where do we need to go? If this is what exists, where do we need to go? But lastly, and most importantly, there's kind of going to be somewhat of a column of the owner, so to speak. And the reason I say the owner is more so, it's a committee. It's not just for Emily and I to do the work. I know a lot of you are very passionate about a lot of things, and how to have a lot of networks and so on. And we would really appreciate if any of you are particularly interested in some of these things, helping to lead some of this, and we can kind of work together in a group to be able to address a lot of these things, because it's it's a committee effort, and so we want to make sure that everyone feels involved, but also are putting their strengths and skills for the betterment of the community, which is why we all joined the community board in the first place. So there's that. So do kind of expect to see something from us, probably not this weekend. I'm probably not going to get to it this weekend, but soon. And your feedback is certainly welcome on how we can strengthen it and how we can work together on addressing a lot of those things. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on that before we move on to the next point under old business. I'll check the chat too.
Yeah, and I would also add to that when we solidify our SMART goals or smartify the goals that we made, that maybe we can think about budget priorities while we are tightening our goals up, just because I feel like there are things that could either be like adjusted or added or taken away from the list that we currently have, so that because I know that those meetings are very long and people usually just work with whatever they're given, unless something like really pops out from the document. So maybe when we're creating these goals, that we could just have in mind, in the back of our minds, like maybe this is something that we could add to the budget priorities as something on the list, being that we just keep recycling what's already there and things are changing.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I mean, like you said, we sometimes kind of start working on it like September. And so if we can start thinking about some of that a little bit sooner, and again, really pairing it up in line with what we're working on, that would be good. I guess maybe the last thing on committee priorities, I know we talked about how we can improve the internal working of the committee. And so I was giving this some thought, and this is very much a thought, and would welcome feedback in terms of the actual structure of our meetings. And so, we usually have the welcome and introductions, and then, we have whatever items are there, and then old business, new business, and then kind of adjournment. And so ideally, I thought it would be nice if, where we can, if possible, to have a presentation of some sort from an agency. So like we did this evening. Again, it's probably not going to happen all the time. Obviously, it's subject to availability and when, some of these colleagues can join. And if not, then we would, kind of work on one of the priorities that we've identified for the year. But then that there would be a second section, as we also did this evening, of a presentation from a community partner. So again, thanks to Emily for working with Andrea to join us this evening and presenting on Met Council. And then, followed by, kind of an update from elected representatives. I think we had spoken about probably doing every month, like a short email update from what they're currently working on. And then quarterly, they could appear and, join us for 10 minutes or so and kind of talk about what they're respectively working on. In our conversations with both offices, Councilmember Abreu and Councilmember De La Rosa, they agreed, and they felt that that cadence was appropriate, and they were happy to join us, every quarter for a few minutes and kind of talk specifically with us about what they're working on related to housing and human services. So just wanted to share that thought in terms of how we could better structure the meetings. Any thoughts or feedback? It's okay if there isn't any, or if you agree.
I agree.
Okay, good. Thanks, Aisha, but happy to take feedback if there's, an idea comes up and you're like, actually, this might work as well. Awesome. We can now move on to the Fort Washington Armory. I'll just give a quick update on that. So I attended the, maybe I'll take a step back. As some of you may know, the Kingsbridge Armory in the Bronx is currently, there's kind of like a group of different stakeholders, and I don't know all of the details, but I attended one of their organizing workshops. And so there's a group of different stakeholders from the community that are looking to repurpose the way or kind of re-envision how the Kingsbridge Fort Armory can be used. Obviously, right now it's defunct. It's not being used. It's been sitting there for 20 plus years. And they've started having a series of workshops kind of community workshops where people are going and talking about how they can better use the space. And what I understand will then happen is kind of coming out of that, there's going to be a proposal and then, or kind of a list of recommendations. There's going to then be kind of a request for proposals out to the community and kind of different companies to revamp the space. And so they're going through this whole process. And so I attended this event, and there were probably about over 200 people. It was not held again in the Armory because the Armory itself is, you can't go in there, but it was held at a school right across the street from the Armory. And to me, it was just amazing to see the number of people that were out there, like people of all ages, people of different backgrounds, different walks of life, having these discussions on how that space can better be used for their community, which I thought was really cool. So the reason why I attended one is to kind of get a sense of how they're kind of undergoing that process. And I recognize that what's happening there is slightly different than what's happening or the current situation at the Fort Washington Armory. And so I went, I guess, and kind of to get a sense of how they're going about it. And I just wanted to report that back to all of you. I know that we were thinking about kind of how that public forum would look like. We had talked about the elected officials and the different panels, but I also wonder if there's a portion as well where we have a similar sort of setup where it's kind of like the way they had it set up, it was like 4 groups. So they had facilitators there, both English and in Spanish. And they had a series of questions, and I took pictures and I don't have them with me at the moment, but some of the questions were like, what would you do with this space? And they even had like a model of the Armory there, pictures of it and everything. And it was really well organized, I thought, the event. But yeah, just any thoughts? I'll just kind of leave it open for a moment.
So first, I want to apologize to Mariel. We had tentative plans to have a conversation this week, but this week really exploded on me. In regards to what's happening at the Kingsbridge location, so that there's been many proposals over the years as far as what needs to happen there. The community has fought for change with what's happening there for a while. And I was excited at first to see, finally, there seems to be a really, constructive, organized action in that regard. There seems to be movement until I saw who was leading the charge. That's Economic Development Corporation. And for many of us that, walk the walk on the grassroots side of things, we don't always feel that EDC is friendly, because it seems like they come in with all these vision boards and planning ideas and getting community input, but at the end, it doesn't seem as if the work that the community does to express their interest and oftentimes give sophisticated input. I've seen 60-page reports be completely ignored that come from people who have a level and expertise in some of the subject areas. And to me, it's just not justified. The way that it's handled sometimes by EDC. And so my concern is that with the Kingsbridge matter, that there may be a level of smoke and mirrors there. They have their plan already in place. And this is how I feel, but when I have expressed it to others, they're like, yeah. And actually there's a feed on Facebook right now, which happened without my involvement, but then I ended up on the thread where people were saying, yeah, we know what that's going to end up being with EDC involved. And so it just raises concerns. We always hope for better, but we have to also be aware of what history has shown us. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. But I am also proud and encouraged that this goal that we have on our plate to have a public hearing is coming out of this board, is coming out of the work that began here in our district where this building is, and we're the community board. And so hopefully we can definitely create a space that is respective of the respects the community interest, respects their interest. And I feel like that is what we are approaching. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Aisha. Like I said, I don't know much of the background of the Kingsbridge Armory. I know just a little. And so even though the kind of the armories are obviously different in terms of their circumstances, I wonder if at least capturing some of the process that they did in terms of how we approach the public forum for the Fort Washington Armory, again, kind of having those small groups of discussions, and looking at kind of, finding ways to mimic some of that or adjust accordingly or tweak, maybe an approach that we can think about as it relates to the public forum. And again, maybe it's after kind of the speakers and, we have the different stakeholders that we've talked about, and then have this kind of sort of, I would imagine the event would probably be 2 hours or so, maybe, I don't know, to allow for sufficient conversation. But then the idea would be, okay, so then what comes out of the public forum? And maybe it is that we ourselves as the committee maybe then kind of capture these comments and put out a small paper that says, okay, out of this event, this is what happened. And this is what, community members stated that they would like to see at the Fort Washington Armory. Maybe it's more, programming for seniors. Maybe it's things in the arts, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And if I might, if no one else was going to speak, I honestly really enjoyed their process. I enjoyed, getting the Post-its and being able to give your input and seeing it on the wall and seeing how, like ideas are put together from the community, and you can see how, people are thinking maybe along the same path, or how some people are differing and putting out something that you may never have thought of. Some of the information that may have been shared, it was definitely a community building event. The only disappointment of it is to see very little of it applied at the end. So I would definitely agree with using some of the methods but of course honoring the inputs at the end.
Okay. Thank you, Aisha. Emma, it looks like you were gonna.
Yeah,
chime
I
in.
have a quick comment about the Armory, well, the Kingsbridge one. From the process that I saw, because I did somehow get connected with the organizer that's putting together the stakeholders that are doing a lot of the planning. I really do hope that it doesn't go down the route that Aisha is suspecting, although, like, you know, yeah, hopefully history doesn't repeat itself. But I did see that there was a lot of collaboration or talks or meetings that would go on with the stakeholders, and it would be with all of the local grassroots organizations. And they're the ones that created that really awesome video that's on that website. And they spoke about, like, oh, this is what we need in the community right now. We need extracurricular activities for the youth, and the youth were like saying what they wanted in the video. Some people were like, oh, I really want a skating rink. So then in these meetings, they were actually talking about, I mean, I wasn't allowed to go in, but I slipped in there as a Zoom meeting. And he was kind of guiding them and telling them, like, hey, yes, okay, you want a skating rink, but just know that somebody has to, like, own that section, whatever that section is, be it an LLC, 501c3, whatever, but somebody has to, like, maintain it. Like, he was basically guiding them, telling them what they had to do in order to get whatever space or whatever, you know, thing that they wanted in that huge space. So I just feel like we do need a little bit more, because they did have a bunch of experts, like, give guidance on things. So being that our Armory is not, like, completely empty as the Kingsbridge is, we just have to sort of talk about maybe the dynamic that we want to go on in this Armory. Maybe it would help to get a tour. I'm not too sure how to go about this so that we could sort of just see the lay of the land as it is now and what we want to be added to it. So I feel like that's something that we should consider.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In regards to the tour, we've attempted to have tours in the past, and they've excluded us from many of the spaces in the building. They kind of like ushered us along to where they wanted us to see. And I, at the time, was saying, when do we want to have an understanding of the full capacity of the building so that we can know what full utilization would look like and what kind of utilization makes sense. And I think that's important. And that segues into part of the major concern, like, yes, how can the building best be utilized to full capacity? But how do we prevent it from getting to where it is now, even once everybody weighs in, right? Because this process, I'm assuming, happened long time ago, and it's why the Armory is what it is today, in the sense of a facility that is meant to serve the facility, because that was the decision that was made. That's why the contract has the spirit that it does. But somewhere along the line, somebody forgot. Someone allowed something that wasn't the spirit of the contract to be happening. And here we are today. So not just what do we want, but how do we ensure that what the community says it wants, or what's best for the community, is what is held, you know, and maybe not in perpetuity, but for the long haul, you know, as long as a contract says that it should, for instance. Yeah.
Thanks, Aisha, and thanks, Emily. Just taking thank you for the conversation. Just taking a quick step back to that committee priorities list. So once we kind of pull that together, obviously this is one of the issues that we identified as well. And so just making sure that if there's, you know, any of you or several of you who want to support on some of that, do put yourself forward to support in those efforts, and we can kind of organize and think about how we can do it together. Great. So I think that's it for old business, unless anyone else has anything on the agenda. And if not, we'll move over to new business. Okay. Go ahead, Aisha.
If you had something first, I'd be fine with waiting.
I don't have any, or your hand is up for new business?
Yeah, my hand is up for new
New
business.
business, okay. I think what we do have something, Emily. Is it, oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just gonna give
go ahead,
like a brief, thing of the community meeting on the high rents, which is where I met council. So this was sent out, so Aisha, I'll finish real quick. It was an invitation that was sent out to the community board, and I did attend. A lot of people were there. A lot of people shared testimonies, and they were talking about way bigger issues and like bigger picture topics about how there's owners that are coming from out of state, out of the country, owning buildings, which is basically the issue that we were talking about tonight, and Airbnbs, and tenants having like very specific situations that they're getting caught in because of the way that the system is right now. So there was a lot of like, promises made. Obviously, Senator Jackson was there, Levine was there, Manhattan Borough President Levine, and a few organizations. RENA was there, council members, assembly members were there. So it was a very whole event. It was just unfortunate that it was so short, but also there was just so much to be said as well. And it was kind of sad. So a lot of disappointed people and also a lot of promises made, but I feel like having these meetings definitely showed me like a lot of the bigger issues that are going on in the city, and hopefully we could attend if there's another one going on. And we will probably have a meeting where Rena is going to join us. So that'll be coming soon. I just have to coordinate with them because they do have their meetings at the same time that we do. So let's just see how we work that out. And then I also, I did want to mention something else, but it did slip my mind. Oh, I went to the state of the borough meeting. I did not plan on going. I had so much work to do and I went to work unprepared the next day, but it still worked out. So I'm happy. I did go out there in my working from home attire. I was not aware that everything was going to be so formal. This was the first time ever. But I was like, I hope nobody recognizes me. Everyone did. So it was just like, whatever, but it was a very nice time. Everyone connected. I saw Carmen de la Rosa. I spoke to Manhattan Borough President Levine, and he did mention at the end of his speech that there is a new project that's going on actually, and it's called Housing Manhattanites. I have to admit, because I just received the report like yesterday or today, I don't remember. It does have to do, it's like an initiated project that they have on that looks at the city's vacancies for opportunities of creating new housing. So they're basically going to revitalize old buildings, parking lots, structures that are in the city that just not being used well or occupied, to make affordable units. Now, I don't know if it's going to be affordable or actually affordable, but I think that's the conversation that we should be having with them. He did mention, or he didn't mention this, actually, Wayne Benjamin told me that he did call upon all the chairs in land use and that he debriefed them on the report. And I think it's because a lot of the community boards have land use and housing together, but we're separate. So that's why we didn't get invited. So I'm not too sure like why they didn't just say land use and housing committees. So I'm not too sure where we slipped through the cracks there. But he did give a briefing on it and he's going to bring it to general meetings. So I'm pretty sure maybe in the next general meeting, he's going to be talking about this. But in the meantime, I am going to send you guys the report that was just sent to me, and it's already out. Like it came out after he did the speech. So it just came out like yesterday or the day before, on the 171 locations in the borough that are potentially going to be turned into thousands of homes for people, and hopefully affordable, all of them. So I'll be sending that to you guys, since you can't even copy and paste in the chat. I'll just send it via email for everyone who's in the panel. And yeah. Richard, not sure if you have a question in regards to anything I said. I mean, you were there too. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
I want to comment briefly on that. I think it's a really important program. I think it would be worth having a presentation here, figuring out what needs to be done to coordinate that with land use. I think it's also going to take a lot of advocacy behind it, because a lot of that is going to push into what we often call NIMBY responses. Housing shouldn't be built here, build it over there, build it over somewhere else. And I think that could be an incredibly valuable thing for this committee to do if we can figure out what's an appropriate advocacy position and begin to confront some of those NIMBY sentiments that may be coming up in the neighborhood.
Definitely. And I see that Marielle, she put the document. Okay, that's nice. I was just thinking about the link. We could throw documents in there too. And all right. Any comments on what I just said?
I just wanted to comment that our board has done vacancy studies in the past for our district. And the board office should have copies of that. It may not be complete. I'm not sure, because Richard Lewis was working on it. I believe Scott Stringer's office was involved in that as well. Scott Stringer had proposed a land bank idea for vacant properties. I'm not sure where that stands. However, this board voted on a community land trusts being established in our district. And there's actually a working group that received a grant from, it may be from DHCR, if I remember correctly. Don't hold me to that. But there was a grant that was given to help develop groups with an interest in creating a community land trust. So just want to make that a part of the record when we're having a conversation about vacancies of land and developing them. So
yeah. Thank you, Aisha. And one other thing that was sort of indirectly, well, I did it for like personal recreational use, or I went to this event. It was for We Act for Environmental Justice, and they had a Justice 40 initiative event for agencies. And I didn't, actually, it was all a surprise. I was just invited and I said, okay, I'll hop on the bus. And they did like a toxics tour of Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, South Bronx. And like every single agency that you could think of was there, DEC, EPA, everyone. And they came from all over. And they were kind of just trying to have a conversation with all of these agencies on Justice 40, which is the, I think it was under the Biden administration. Yeah, it was just recently put under the Biden administration, that the goal is that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow into disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, overburdened by pollution. And they say that the categories of investment are climate change, clean energy, energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, et cetera, et cetera. So housing is included there. And I just feel like maybe I did get in contact with people in We Act that could speak to this in one of our future meetings. And that would be a great conversation, because that's just another puddle of money that we could tap into, and it could be some kind of a sustainable housing. So it's not like we have another, like we'll do affordable housing, but then it's just going to be like breaking down and bad maintenance. We don't want to like repeat things that are happening in NYCHA again. So if that's what's happening, if that's what's going to happen, where it's like, let's make cheap housing that breaks down quick, or like, we just don't want that. So I just feel like that would be a great conversation, and I'm going to be bringing them in one of our future meetings for that. And that's that. That's all I wanted to say. And I think, Aisha, did you have something separate to say though?
I
Well,
did.
okay.
And I'll be brief because I know we're getting,
Mhm.
it's getting a little late. Okay, so I wanted to, and I just came across this in the last couple of days. I haven't had a chance to really read up on it, but HUD announced over $116 million to public housing agencies, which kind of piggybacks on what you were just saying. But this is for the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. So I was wondering, and I actually have a contact in HUD, and I have to see if maybe I can make some connections there, but it would be good to have an understanding of what their intentions are with that program. Sorry, hope my phone decides to ring. So it basically says these funds will be used to assist families in increasing their assets and improving their financial stability through the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And that was January 26, 2023. So it's fairly new. But Marsha Ebanks was also not Marsha Ebanks, Marsha Fudge, the HUD secretary, was also involved in a event that my cohort, I'm in school to become a real estate appraiser, was invited to participate via online. And it was about the disproportionate treatment of people of color in the appraisal industry. One of the things I've known was that 90% of real estate appraisers are white men, 94% of real estate appraisers are white. And so clearly there's a disproportionate representation there, and the impacts have been discrimination, devaluations of properties, and it's essentially a form of theft that happens to people who own. And I think in this committee, we haven't put enough focus on the ownership bracket of that falls under housing. I brought this up in land use as well, and there is something that's called USPAP. It's getting late. I don't know if I'm going to remember all what the acronym means, but I'm going to put together an email to both land use and the housing committee to kind of break down what I've been learning about it. But there is a what is called a exposure draft opportunity where the appraisal industry seeks input from members of the public, entities, institutions about how the appraisal industry can be changed in order to serve the public trust, which is a very important part of what appraisers do. We're legally bound to serve the public trust. And so I want to be able to share that with the community, with the community board and our committee, of course, so that maybe we can weigh in on what's best for our community. Steve Simon commented in land use that something that we probably need to address is that there's a disproportionate taxing that happens to our district. And I learned a little bit about that, but it's something that I also want to dig into. So I'm going to be doing some research with us so that then I can, apprise the committee and see if we can do some work in that area as well. So that being said, lastly, I was on Nextdoor. I don't know if anybody from the committee is on Nextdoor. It's a website where people share about, so many different things. It's kind of like a Facebook for the neighborhood. But a woman had commented that she lives actually not too far from me. She lives in 605 West 170th Street. And she has dark smoke blowing through her window. And so, she has pollution concerns. This committee did pick up in the past, working with WEACT, the fact that the gases needed to be changed legally. There was a mandate that required landlords to switch the type of gas that they use. So I don't know if that's what's happening in her case, but she raised it. I invited her to come to the community board. She said she probably wouldn't be able to come tonight, but I gave her the board office information, as well as the links to the Zoom and all of that, so she could sign up and get our emails. But I wanted to put that before the committee so that maybe it's something that we can address later. Maybe, when you speak with WEACT and they come, maybe this is a discussion that we can have about what's happening with that.
And you said there's black smoke in the building, or?
It's blowing in through her window, she said. But she says, I actually have it up in front of me. A new owner acquired the building last year and has changed the boiler and source of heating fuel to gas. The intense odor and dark color of the smoke is smelled and seen multiple times a day. This goes out into our atmosphere and my apartment faces the chimney. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that before the committee.
Thanks, Aisha. And I think you're right in terms of probably linking that up when kind of we're able to kind of invite WEAC to join us for a meeting. Maybe they can give like a presentation of some sort. I see that Richard has his hand up. Go ahead, Richard.
He just lowered it.
For the record, her name is Juliet Levin. And I also gave her Ebenezer's information and let her know what his role is so that it, it's not pending us addressing it, that she has some other avenues to try to, seek supports.
Yep, exactly right. All right. So I think we're at the hour. I don't see any other hands for new business. And so maybe the last bit is, would anyone like to volunteer to take the minutes for this month's? Oh, Richard, are you volunteering to take the minutes?
No, I was actually I was going to sneak in one other comment.
Go ahead really quickly.
Which is just appreciation for a meeting of substance and done crisply and finishing up in 2 hours. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Richard. Team effort for sure. Both Emily, but also all of you. So thank you. Any volunteers for minutes?
I can take the minutes for this month.
Okay.
And I don't know if we want to just do month by month or if people want to volunteer for a certain month, but that's also great.
Emily, I can do it this month.
Wait, didn't you do it last or the time before the last? I could do this month. And then
I
we'll
was
just
going to
keep,
say,
like,
okay.
Michelle did December, and I think you did November, Emily.
Did I?
I think so. I did January. So if there are others that are on the committee that haven't done minutes, it would be really helpful. Maybe we can kind of, as Emily suggested, if you can identify a month that maybe things are not too heavy on your schedule and you can help out with that, that would be really appreciated because it does take everyone.
So I was about to say, is it okay that I can do March? Because I'm like in the middle of exams and I am already like, I don't know how I'm breathing. I'm hardly sleeping. So I'm not avoiding it. So I'll commit to March.
Okay, it sounds good. Thank you.
Noted.
No, we recognize it's February's a little busy for me too.
Actually, Emily, one of the things you might want to capture before we go is the attendees, because it doesn't seem to record in the YouTube.
Oh yeah, we receive it though, because
okay.
you know how like the Zoom, it records like who enters. So
you guys get it, because I've done minutes before and I couldn't find who was attending.
Yeah, if you do it through YouTube, you won't know, which I noticed. And then Marielle was like, "Well, you could do it this way," and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know I could." So Chanel, she provides
you guys have access to the Zoom, or can we access it also?
Well, not access, but Chanel sent us the recording, the link to the recording.
Okay.
And then it includes the list of attendees. Yeah.
So whoever does minutes in the future, it's something to know because it's been frustrating in the past for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay. So did I hear right that who's doing it for February? Sorry.
Well, Aisha volunteered for March.
Yes, yep.
I can do it. I'm actually, I have a lot of time this month.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. Much appreciated. All right, and so with that, we could probably adjourn the meeting. Can I get a motion?
A second. I think Bruce thirded.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. The meeting is adjourned at 9:08 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.